How much do Canadians know about their own history? It really depends on the sphere of history that you're looking at. In some ways, Canadians' understanding of their own history has improved significantly because of the efforts of a lot of the people who've been supporting Indigenous rights, for example, and really underlining the degree to which Indigenous peoples were pushed off their historical lands, were shoved into residential schools, basically had assimilation forced on them, linguistic assimilation. So that part of Canadian education has improved very, very much. At the same time, there are areas in which Canadians, in their own minds, have kind of a blank slate, and that blank slate, unfortunately, gets crowded out by American historical events, and that's particularly true in the second half of the 20th century, and I would argue up to the 21st century. What happened during the 20th century was Canada became a genuinely sovereign nation after World War I. In the 1930s, during the signing of the Treaty of Westminster, Canada's power to determine its own foreign policy was ceded by Great Britain. And that meant that during the Second World War, Canada was a genuinely sovereign nation. Now, it was difficult with the British because a lot of the people in the British power establishment simply could not let go of their conceptualization of Canada as part of their empire. In fact, if one reads histories by contemporary historians, contemporary British historians, on the war effort, when they talk about Britain, they will often use the term Britain and her empire and Britain and the Commonwealth interchangeably as if the two things are synonymous. They are not synonymous. During World War II, India was still a colony of Britain. It was part of the British Empire. But during World War II, Canada was certainly not. And Canadian officials had to fight tooth and nail in some cases in order to defend their sovereignty and in order to defend Canadian soldiers from being fed into the British war machine instead of being allowed to operate independently. One reason that there was a Canadian division landing at Juno Beach as a distinctly Canadian division was because of the efforts of people like General MacNaughton, who wanted to emphasize that Canada was its own fighting force. So those were good efforts by Canadian officials and military brass, but at the same time, the general tendency, the gradient of Canadian culture was to sort of wash away Canadian achievements and replace them with American achievements. A really good example of that is one that I came across just recently. A Canadian historian named Greg Baird, who's active on social media, commented that The Great Escape, this is a very famous World War II movie about a big breakout from Stalag Luft 17, was organized primarily by Canadians. Apparently 150 Canadians were involved in organizing this breakout. What happened was Allied POWs, prisoners of war, organized an incredible tunnel digging campaign and managed to create a tunnel from inside the prisoner of war camp and escaped to the outside and made a break for it and tried to get to freedom in Britain. Most of them were rounded up by the Nazis. Most of them were executed. It ended tragically. However, it was an amazing accomplishment of escapism, of tunnel building, of resourcefulness, and so forth. And when that event was turned into a movie, the Canadians were replaced by Americans. And as Baird underlined, the American troops were actually historically in the British POW camp, had been transferred out weeks earlier, because the Germans had this sort of kind of crazy idea that they could negotiate a separate peace with the American forces, and this was moving the Americans out from the POW camp was a way of sort of dangling a bit of temptation in front of American negotiators. It was a crazy idea by the Germans. The Americans did not break ranks with other allies. However, that was German thinking at the time. The upshot for Canadians is that we don't know very much about our own history and our own contributions to big, big events like World War II.